Welcome to Divorce Law with attorney David Badanes.
Welcome to Divorce Law with experienced attorney David Badanes. David has extensive experience in divorce, child custody, child support, divorce mediation, and more. David personally handles each client with the personalized attention they deserve. I'm your host, Abigail Vaca, and today's episode is What is Mediation? A Guide to Conflict Resolution. So, David, let's start with the basics. What is mediation?
Okay, here in New York State, and I think many states deal with mediation differently or call it something else. So mediation here is when the divorcing couple both come into my office, let's say, or any other mediator's office, and the mediator does not represent, one parent or the other parent or either spouse. They act as trying to get the two people to compromise, typically discuss the issues, work out the issues, where the mediator should, and I do emphasize that word should, talk about all the issues that would be involved in a divorce from A to Z, so to speak. And again, go through those issues with the divorcing couple. And again, not represent either one, but discuss those issues and try to get them to agree on something. So at the end of the process, they have agreed to something either verbally or in writing. And again, each mediator does things slightly different, but that's the general overview of mediation, where they go through every issue. And again, the key point is they're not representing either couple. They're calling it, when I do mediation, I say, look, I'm acting sort of like a judge, telling you what the issues are. But again, unlike a judge, I'm trying to get them together into a verbal agreement and possibly a written agreement. We can go over that a little bit later.
Great. And what are some of the pros and cons of mediation?
Well, the pros are easy. The pros is it's much less expensive for the couple. Okay. Instead of having two attorneys, and we'll talk about having attorneys on the side, but instead of having to go to court, and that's usually a very expensive process, going to court is also very timely and it takes a lot of time. In mediation, and again, every mediator does something differently, but most mediators will meet with the couple on a weekly basis or maybe every other week basis, and it could take anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe 7 sessions. So you're talking, a relatively small amount of time to resolve the issues versus courts will be months and months typically. So the pros are you're saving time, you're saving money, and I think the best, and which I didn't mention, best pro is that you're in control of your divorce. You don't have a judge, in a sense, making these decisions. You make the decisions. You can be very creative in a mediation versus maybe not so creative in a court system. And most of the time, if not 99% of the time, I think people who go through mediation are much more happier. I mean, they're not happy getting divorced, of course, but they're happier with the results and how the process works out. So that's the pros. So, of course, what are the cons? The cons are it does not work. It's not for everybody. And some people use mediation as a way to delay things. They will tell their partner, hey, let's go mediation, but they're not really serious. And they're just using it to stall time and maybe gain information and then go to court. And if it's a very complicated divorce, if there's a lot of assets, it may not be the right venue. If there's domestic violence, that is certainly not something if one partner or spouse is a bully, so to speak, then that's not going to work. So if there's an uneven playing field, sometimes, although mediation can be very good and really excellent when there are kids, in some situations, again, one partner may be a bully, so to speak, and trying to override. So mediation is not for everybody, but when it is, and the other thing is both parties have to really agree, in a sense, to do mediation. They both have to be serious about it. And again, that they're really willing to compromise and listen to the other person, with open ears, so to speak, and an open mind. And some people just, for various reasons, I'm not trying to point fingers, but those are the situations where mediation may not be the right thing for the divorcing couple.
That makes sense. If there's a lot of contention, this might
Correct.
not be the method for them. So what are some of the issues that are explored in mediation?
Every issue really should be explored from A to Z. And again, typically you would, and I don't have a format. I really rely on the clients to kind of lead me, and then I lead them. But of course, you'd be talking about child custody, where the kids are going to live most of the time, or maybe 50-50. How are we going to work out holidays? How are we going to work out schooling issues? How are we going to work out decision making for these children, for the children? So that's a big part of it, of course. And then, of course, child support, if there's going to be any or how much. Is there going to be what's called spousal maintenance? Some people still call it alimony. And then, of course, the assets. We have to go through all the assets, whether there's a home, cars, retirement assets, and then, of course, the other side of that, debts, loans, etc. But with the assets, many times in a mediation, they're dealing with a marital home, and they have to decide, well, are we selling it? Who's going to live in it? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we talked about retirement assets have to be discussed, life insurance. So we do go through all the issues that need to be addressed in the divorce document.
So all of that said, should someone still have an attorney represent them in mediation?
A lot goes on in mediation. And although I try to talk in plain English, and we try to, again, go through everything in the session, you should still have an attorney advising you, even whether at the end of the process or through the process. And I've acted in that role as well many times. The thing is, when you have an attorney, you want to pick an attorney that's what I call mediation friendly. They're not looking to, blow up the deal, change the deal and say, hey, you could have got, $100 more there or $50 more there or $1 million, whatever. They're there to, again, kind of maybe explain the legal implications and the legalese maybe, and just act as another voice and explain again to that person what's going on. They shouldn't be there to say, well, like I said before, oh my goodness, you could have, the whole purpose of mediation is a compromise. You don't want that other attorney to, blow it up for whatever reason. But you should have another attorney. In my mediations, I explain that to my clients, that you should have someone either in the beginning of the process, in the middle, or the end. It's up to you, but someone you should speak to just to kind of, as a double check, let's put it that way.
So in New York, what are the requirements to be a mediator? Is there any specific certifications anyone should look for?
So unfortunately, in New York State, and other states are different, anybody over the age, I believe 18, maybe it's 21, I'm not exactly sure, anybody can be a mediator. They've been talking about having certification and legal requirements, but as far as I know, that's still not, anybody can hang up a shingle and call themselves a mediator. Of course, that's not what you want to go to. I believe you should go to someone who is an attorney and a mediator like myself, because there are people out there that are, let's say, social workers or are in the mental health field that have taken classes, so to speak, in mediation. And there are classes out there, and you can get I'll call it a certification, but it's really, they're not certified by New York State. They're just, they're self-certified in a sense. Anybody could get some type of certification. I'm not saying they're bad, because most of these places are legitimate and do teach the mediators how to go through the process. But again, in my opinion, you want someone who's an attorney and a mediator, because they're going to know the law. If the person is, just a mental health professional, and even if they took a class, they're not going to know all the ins and outs, so to speak. And I've seen many other mediators, and there are some very good and some maybe not so good. They'll draft these agreements, and they don't get to all the little ins and outs, so to speak, or that really should be done in a divorce agreement. It's, more generalized, which is, okay, but it's not something I think it's too ambiguous, leaves out too many holes. So I think, again, you want to look for a mediator that is also an attorney.
That's really good to know. So I'm curious, if you go through the process, what exactly happens after a mediation?
So what should happen in a mediation, again, you go through all these things that we talked about, all the issues, and in my office, after a mediation session, I send out an email to both the couple, both parties, saying what we talked about, and I tell them that nothing is written in stone until it is written in stone, meaning on a piece of paper that they sign, and they can, change their mind or change whatever they talk about. Normally that doesn't happen, but we go again through the issues. I give them the overview of what we talked about, summary really. And again, each session we do that. And then at the end, I say, okay, this is all the topics we talked about. Now is the time where I'm going to actually draft something and be a very long document, of course. And once I draft that goes to the couples. Now, some mediators, again, the ones that are not attorneys, they don't really draft what's a divorce agreement. They'll draft sort of a big summary, let's put it that way. And then you have to go to an attorney to draft a real legal document. And again, that's why I say you should go to an attorney for the first place. An attorney, after all the mediation sessions, should draft what its legal term is stipulation of settlement, but I like to talk in regular English. It's a divorce contract, a divorce agreement that is all the terms and conditions of your divorce. Of course, it's a very long document, and that's what should happen at the end of a mediation. Well, that's almost at the end, because once they sign that, there are other requirements in New York State. There's other documents, I should say, that have to be submitted to the clerk and to the court, about 10 to 15 other documents. And again, that has to be done. Well, I shouldn't say have to, but it should be done by an attorney. But so that's what happens after mediation is a lot of legal stuff, so to speak. But the most important thing is the divorce agreement. And that agreement, of course, has to be reviewed, or should be reviewed, by the mediator with the couple.
That makes sense. So that led me to a follow-up question. What
Sure.
if the mediation fails?
Very, very rare. I think I've had maybe one in all the years I've done this. Sometimes, I guess it can happen, and it has happened at least once in my office. And again, I think sometimes when it does fail with other people, it's because, again, one person, it shouldn't have been started in the first place. But there's no legal requirement to go to mediation, and anybody can say quit, or say this is not working for me. And if that happens, they're absolutely, I can't force them to come to my office and or continue the process. So they could say this is not working, and then they could go through a regular divorce. The negatives of God, of course, is that through the process, they may have learned things that they may have not learned in the beginning of a real divorce or contested divorce.
So you kind of touched on it before, but I think it would be nice to end by grounding us again. Who are, would you say, the good candidates for a mediation versus those who maybe aren't as good of candidates for mediation?
Sure. So again, I think good candidates are people who are, they know that they both want a divorce. They just don't know how to get from A to Z, or what needs to be done in a divorce. They also are not fighting like cats and dogs, so to speak. They can be very civil to each other. They just maybe fell out of love or whatever happened, but they know that they both want a divorce. They're not out there to kill each other, so to speak, in any way, shape, or form. Many times it is good for people who do have children that want the best for their children and are looking not to, oh, that person, the other person can't see their kids ever. I hate them, blah, blah, blah. They do realize that you're going to be parents for these children for the rest of your life. And again, typically another aspect of being a good candidate is not too many, you don't own like 1,000 companies, you have a pretty straightforward career, a W-2 employee. No one's hiding income. In other words, no one's, let's say, maybe off the books and not declaring all their income. So those are the good candidates. And I guess bad is kind of the flip side of what I just said. If there's any type of domestic violence going on, if one person is sort of the bully, so to speak, or overpowering personality, if one person is, has their own business and is quote unquote off the books, or if they're on the books, but they're not declaring all their income, those are bad candidates for mediation, because who knows what. In mediation, I have no power to, do subpoenas or anything else, right? So those are not very good candidates. And again, if one person's like, even with they have children, I never want that other person to see my kids or anything of that nature. They have to be coming in, in a civil manner with the idea that, yes, we are going here to compromise, to talk like reasonable adults. Those are the good and bad candidates.
Well, thank you so much for all of this information. And thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. You have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too. And thank you for joining us for Divorce Mediation. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on our channel.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.